Um, I'd like to move on. We're just looking around to make sure that all the appropriate people are in the room. Now we've come on to the stage where we will focus more on the concept of healthy villages. And I'd like to invite to come forward Sam German, who, let me just move on to the right slide. He's the Director of Healthy Villages. Welcome, Sam.
Morning, everyone, and thank you, Christine. This for the next half an hour, having set some hopefully some useful context with the earlier messages that you heard, we just thought we'd spend some time getting into a bit more detail on what the actual concept is, and hopefully move to sort of the tangible opportunities that we hope will be inviting you to sort of collaborate around. I am currently missing one leg of this in terms of Councillor Kennedy, who's been caught up in some business, but he's on his way, so hopefully he'll be able to sort of join in the conversation as soon as he arrives. What we wanted to do really was to really give you an idea in a bit more detail as to the journey so far, where we've gotten to, and use that as a kind of a platform to say, okay, what might be next then? Where might we go next? And as you heard, and I'm glad Peter Axon said it, and pretty much Dr. Coward repeated the same message, that question can't be answered by a single party or a single voice. It just begs collaboration, doesn't it? And also I'd say as well, one of the things that we've probably learned quite clearly through the process that we've gone through so far, the last couple of years, is that some of the answers, or part of the answers, or components of the answers, necessarily, we believe, will already be there. Will be in the local health economy, will be in your heads, will be in your catalogues and portfolios. And what we hope to do is to sort of have those emerge, have those offered forward as part of a collaborative process, and let's see what we can build together, right? So that's the kind of the offer that's emerging. So for the story so far, now it was interesting hearing Andrew speak earlier and hearing him relay some of the things that we've uncovered with our data analysis over the last sort of six months or so. In December, we did what we were calling an interim evaluation. It's probably too strong a term. We'd at that point been running for only 6 months in terms of signing up real people onto service. But what was emerging almost immediately from the start was this sense of interesting stories about the people that we were working to. And I mean, Heather, just put your hand up, will you? So Heather O'Sullivan, that's the Heather that Dr. Coward was referring to, so she's in the room. And there are others as well. I know some of the organisations, the community groups that have been at the centre of this. Birmingham Settlement are in the room, for example, for Chardin. So there are people here who are part of the stories that we're alluding to, right? So as part of the conversational process of exploring possibilities, just discover who's here and ask them. There are plenty of people who are involved that can give you some real life insight into some of the stuff we're going to be talking about now. So where are we now? Well, as of today, we currently have about 650 real people in real places. That's a kind of a phrase that I'll use from time to time, registered on something called Complete Care. Complete Care was the first, if you like, collaboration, service offer, future model of care that the Healthy Villages Partnership worked on and has worked up. And really that's the example we're going to give you today as to, what's possible. Okay, those 650 individuals reside in Borsall Heath, Shard End and Castle Vale right now. Potentially, we're currently looking at other areas of Birmingham that have cohorts that we believe could benefit from a further deployment of the model. In order to do that, we think we'd need to sort of look at making the model more robust. And more robust means digitalization largely, but it also means figuring out how we do this at scale and how we start to leverage some of the, let's just say, the assets and skills and commodities that might already be in and around the Birmingham health economy. That's the offer that's on the table. So if I just scan down, is this going to all come up in one go? Yeah. Okay. So this, look, I'm going to do this very quickly because it's largely it's gone back. Okay. Thank you. It's largely it's a picture, and some of you may have seen this already. It's a picture that this describes, if you like, the system challenge that we tried to take on. Now, 2 years ago, when individuals were getting round tables and having conversations and saying, what is it we need to address as a system challenge, it became apparent from the start that it was a big old challenge, if I could put it that way. And this was one of the graphs that we landed on after several months of head-scratching, conversation, debate, and exploration, which kind of started to give us a steady view of the system that we thought we wanted to the system challenge we wanted to address. And if I could just take it from the sort of top left, what's been mentioned already is something. Can you hear me okay? Is it okay? From the top left, what we realised that there was a big issue around lifestyles and well-being, and I think that's been well spoken to already by Andrew Coward in his earlier segment. But our ambition there was to really understand. It was about data capture. For those of you who were party to a workshop in January last year, Karen Creevin, head of Wellbeing Services in Birmingham, I think articulated this really well. What she was saying is that we have no real robust way of measuring all the activity that's out there in terms of what people are doing when they go for a run in the local park or walk their dogs or are out there doing locally good stuff, living their day-to-day lives, having a sense of an ability to capture some of that data in addition to the stuff that we do capture. I.e., if you attend a local authority-sponsored, well-being facility, you may well swipe a card there or register and give us some data. That's all well and good, but that's a mere fraction of the data that we think ought to be available to us if we're thinking of the wider well-being provision around Birmingham. And Birmingham City Council have done some great work and have some wonderful ambition, I think, to provision world-class well-being and activity facilities for its residents. But the data would be helpful in terms of deciding how we do this on a much more effective and targeted basis. So that's what the top right bit was about. If I go bottom right for a second, I'm deliberately doing this in a particular order to hopefully get us to a particular place. The bottom right we refer to as ambient intelligence, and I have to say that always raises a question. So anyone who's got a better way of describing what we think we want to do there, let us know today and we'll happily update this slide. But really what this is this is our opportunity to bring in research and development, ambition, resources, appetite from academia, from startups, and even from some of the larger tech firms that might have a contribution to make here. We wanted to create a space which says, how do we get all that sort of resource into one conversation so that we see two things happening primarily. One is the village becomes the place to learn. And that's what today's about. So the 16 or so challenges that we're going to put to you through this event today are the lived experience of trying to do this in real places. That's what's come from Shardend, Bolsleith, and Castle Vale, right? We haven't sat in a room like this one and made up these challenges. They've come from Heather and the other navigators and the other community groups sort of saying, yeah, this is our lived experience of trying to do this for your patients, for your service users. So that's what we're offering to you today. The other thing it allows us to do is to make sure that the conversations we're having in those localities are what we call improvement conversations. So we can come back iteratively and say, okay, let's give this a go then. We've got an idea of some things that might work locally. Let's give them a try. Let's measure them. Let's see if they work. And that way we're engaging with what we're calling an improvement conversation. It's a bit jargony, but I'm afraid that's where we've gotten to so far. The top right is an interesting one. When Peter Axon was given, it's a horror story of a statistic that Peter mentions, and it comes up from time to time, and we often discuss this now, and people talk about it as if it's £8 billion extra for the NHS. That should be all right. By 2020, if we can get ourselves up to about 30 billion with a couple of efficiencies, that'd be all right as well. That's actually quite it's an enormous financial challenge, not just for health, but for all public provision in the UK. And it's not just the UK. That's the other thing to sort of note about that. This is a problem which a lot of Western economies in particular are facing and have been facing for some time. What I want to say about the Village Pound, piece of work is, I mean, okay, it has a lot to do with economics. It has a lot to do with drawing in social responsibility funding and connecting with CSR agendas of organisations. And there are many in Birmingham who are involved with us in working through this question simply because they employ a lot of people here, or they have a lot of local interest in getting it right for Birmingham, and they're poised to be part of this conversation when it comes to how do we address that wider fundamental socioeconomic challenges which is underneath what we're trying to do here. What we want to do with the Village Pound part of the system is ask ourselves this question. The issues that are driving that problem, the £30 billion deficit, right, largely from a health perspective, comes down to people saying, well, you know what, people are living longer, and as a result of that, they're getting ill and they're going to hospital. Well, I say, why is longer a problematic thing for us to think about? So there's an invitation to see if we can reframe that question. My mother's 85, right, and as she lived long enough, hopefully she'll have a few more good years in her and be able to enjoy it, right? So there's something about how we frame these challenges and reframe some of the challenges, if you like, to make them a little bit more doable, a little bit more food for thought, and a little bit more something that drives this collaborative process that we're hoping we can get into. The final part of this system model that we came up with is really the thing that we've gone into a bit more depth on, and we refer to it, technically speaking, as something called a latent confidence network. That's our jargon. If marketing label for it is Complete Care. That's the service that we're referring to when we say we've trialled this 650 people who are now benefiting from Complete Care as a provision. We're looking at their lives in a very specific way, and that's the thing I really want to introduce to you now as the offer around the model. I'm going to jump that slide because it didn't look the way I expected it to. And this one slightly looks a bit more like it. Okay, so if you could imagine the blue nodes on here, and this is the Complete Care model for you. Okay, quick in a quick 2-minute summary. The blue nodes are referring to statutory provision. You can see around Mary a navigator. Around Mary and a navigator, so our Heathers, and there are a few of our district nurses and community groups like Birmingham Settlement, Borseley Forum in the example that Councillor Kennedy can go into a bit more detail on for us, and many others, I could quote many others, are acting as navigators in conjunction with Mary's wider well-being in relation to her, her lived experience. And what we're trying to do is to shift the balance, if you like, of interactions and dependency, shift from the blue nodes to the green nodes. And there's a very good reason we want to do that. Not because we're trying to, not have Mary go and see a GP. We actually want Mary to go and see a GP for the right reasons. 40% of GP appointments in Borseley are to do with non-medical issues, anxiety, debt stress, worried well, if you like, housing issues, immigration issues and all that sort of stuff. 40%. Right? I mean, we were really struck when that particular metric emerged. We don't think that that's a good use of a GP's time necessarily. So what we're wanting to do is, as Dr. Coward explains, is to look a bit more widely around Mary's lived experience, a wider life, and say, are there other things in and around and near to where Mary is, which we could connect her to, better serve that purpose of dealing with, the underlying issues that she's experiencing, be it debt, be it isolation, be it low opportunity to get out and about. Right? That's the way I would frame that challenge. So the sort of things that we've been doing through this pilot is having, as was the example that was given earlier. Mary wanted to do some exercise, a 70-odd-year-old individual who's asked the question, if we could wave a magic wand for you and have you do anything at all. In fact, when were you most happy? What were you doing then? And she thought it through and came up with the idea, I'd love to be part of a gym. We don't necessarily expect that to have been the response. but actually the physical, the opportunity to get out and be active and socialise out there came from that, as we've assessed as given massive benefits for not just the individual concerned, but a whole range of people in and around her life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we look at some of the Experian analysis that we did on the socio-economic implications of how this model might be working. The other thing I'd say about this model very quickly, and note I've been joined by Councillor Kennedy, so in a second or two we can go into some of the what happened in Borseley question more specifically. But the other thing I'd like to say about the green nodes on this map is they are the majority of what is available for a person, whatever their condition is. In other words, if you think about how much time on the face of a clock an unwell person, as we might see them, spends in front of a clinician at a hospital appointment, or being visited by a community care clinician, no matter how the extent of the package, that will always be a very small percentage of the time in that person's life that they spend doing the other things that we might be able to facilitate further interaction over. Right, so and in some cases in particular, some of the nodes on there have turned out to be, from the evidence that we've seen for the pilot users, to be extremely powerful provision and powerful influences for that person's long-term well-being and happiness. So we talk about neighbourly neighbours in Borseley. The example that Andrew Coward gave earlier is exactly that. The person on Heather's caseload was a neighbourly neighbour herself. She was looking after a more older, more infirmed friend of hers, just purely out of that's just simply what she did. So that being the model at this stage, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to ask Councillor Kennedy to mention a few things about the Borseley experience, and then we'll look at the